Hello everyone, welcome to Mental Health Awakening 2. And today's episode is actually going to be the last guest episode of the series. So it's going to be really good, but it's not going to be the last episode of the series because we're going to try and do we're going to try to do a reunion episode, and also the last episode will just be me and Angela just rounding the series off. But today it's going to be our last guest episode. And today, me and Angela are joined with Charlotte, and today's topic is going to be OCD. And we haven't done an OCD episode before, so it's going to be really interesting to see from Charlotte's point of view and maybe explain a little bit about what OCD is. Other than me talking, I'm going to let Charlotte and Angela introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Angela, and then I'll go with Charlotte for your introductions.
Hello. I'm Angela T. Jack in the state of Tennessee, the USA. I'm glad to be here partnering with the UK. This topic is very important. I like that we are zeroing in on a specific diagnosis, a specific topic, other than just talking about mental health in general. So this is going to be awesome. Definitely excited to hear Charlotte's perspective.
Yeah. Thanks, Angela. So Charlotte, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, so I'm Charlotte. I'm autistic and I have POTS. And part of being autistic, I have strong symptoms of OCD. So this is quite an important topic for me because I think out in the world, people have different ideas of what OCD is, and it's really important for people to know what OCD actually is compared to what people think it is.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and it's going to be really good to hear about it, because I might relate in some aspects being autistic too. So it's going to be really interesting. So I guess before we start going into your kind of with your experience, if you mind just maybe explain a little bit what OCD is.
So OCD for me is where I get intrusive thoughts that are unwanted, completely against my values and my beliefs, and they can be quite distressing. And I often get them pretty much daily, but they kind of can come and go in different themes. So um, sometimes it could be contamination, other times it could be safety, and my fears just get completely out of control. And the fears that I have and the thoughts that I get are a lot of the time very irrational and don't always make logical sense. But my mind goes into like a big spiral and the thoughts get worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point that you can't even rationalize what you're thinking.
Okay. Yeah, I completely understand because, like, as I say, you're like, maybe, would you say it's like a state of worry? Just maybe you're worrying about something and you can't.
Constant worry. So when I was on holiday in Turkey, I constantly worried about what if my house goes on fire, my cats are there. The cats were being looked after by a family member, but I have fears of that. But I'm not there. I'm not able to do anything about that fault. And then it goes into, if that happens, what's going to happen to my house? What's going to happen to me and my partner? What's going to happen to money? What's going to happen with the cats? And, it goes into, I'm going to get charged for something, even though I'm not there. And I then go straight to, right, that's it. I'm going to go to prison. And it goes to like the worst case scenarios constantly. Another thing that I sometimes experience is contamination. So if I've sort of touched handlebars out in public, I sometimes feel, and it's important to know that it's not all the time that I will have these themes. So sometimes when I touch a handlebar, the thought will go, you've got germs on your hands. Them germs are going to start disintegrating your skin. You need to go wash your hands now. But then I'm washing my hands, I'm thinking, but washing my hands is going to make it go into my skin even more. And it just gets worse and worse and worse until it's sort of uncontrollable. They're just two examples that I have experienced. And there are some thoughts where, you know, you could be at a train station, for example, and I've had thoughts of what would happen if I push someone in front of the train? And I have no intention of hurting anyone, completely against who I am as a being. And that can be really distressing because you're thinking, but why am I thinking this? Does that make me a bad person? And you're constantly questioning how you are as a person. You know, am I a good person? Am I a bad person? That thought means that I'm a bad person because I have very black and white thinking. So because I've had that bad thought, I can't unsee that I've thought that.
Right. Yeah, I completely understand because I'm not sure if it is part of OCD, but when I was younger, I still sometimes do it now. I would look around. I'll maybe put the switch on, maybe light on. Maybe it's in my head. It'll say I've got to do 5 or 6 times, and I'll do it 5 or 6 times, or something bad will happen in my head.
Yeah,
I think that, and in the kitchen there's like below the drawers there's like a thing that you can look under, and I'll go. I don't. I'm not as bad as I used to, and then my mum will be like, "What are you doing?" I said, in my head, they said I've got to look down there like 5 or 6 times. It was worse. It was like 20. I'd be there like 10 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that. I think that is OCD. I think.
It sounds a bit similar to what I get as well when I sometimes leave the house and I feel like I have to go and check all the switches are off, and because otherwise I feel that something bad's going to happen, even though I know logically, although the switch is on, nothing is going to happen to that switch. But I have this intense need to go and check all the switches, and then I'll get to the front door and I'll think, you didn't check all of them, did you? Even though I know that I did, but I'll still then have to go check it again just to make sure. It's like a self-doubt that you get. And sometimes I'll have thoughts of, am I going insane? Because you have these thoughts and you feel like you're going crazy. And then you think, what if like I've had episodes of doing something, but I'm not aware that I've done something, but I know that I haven't. And it happens more frequently than I like to admit.
Yeah.
Charlotte, you've done an amazing job as far as describing what OCD is and what that looks like for you. And
Thank you.
it's interesting because sometimes people want to combine phobias and OCD together when really phobia is the base of that is fear. But with OCD, as you've described, they're the urges, they're the unprompted urges and desires, the intrusive thoughts, the potentially unwanted behaviors that are, as you said, that are that are opposite of your values and desires and choices that you would ordinarily make knowingly. So that you've done an amazing job describing that. And where fear can overlap both of them, you know, phobias are primarily things that you're afraid of. So with OCD, when you find yourself spiraling, it can involve being in public. Maybe you're in a situation or a circumstance where you may not be able to hop out of line and go wash your hands as quickly as you want to. So guess what? You've got that thought playing over and over and over in your head until you actually act on it. Then you act on it, and then there's another thought, and it intensifies in some ways.
It does, and it can feel like I constantly need some sort of reassurance on the thoughts that I'm having. So I remember one time I went away with a group of friends, and I didn't know anything about POCD, never heard of it before. A kid like running around on the sand naked, and I remember thinking, oh, I wish they'd put clothes on that child. Because for me, I remember when I was a kid, I hated being naked. Just really didn't like it. But then I was thinking, why am I thinking that? Does that make me a paedophile? Why am I thinking that? Does that make me a bad person? When I know it's related to my own faults when I was a child, as opposed to obviously other bad intentions. But I've heard and sort of from other people's experiences that because there's a big sort of, it sounds silly, but some people refer to it as like a trend of saying, oh, you're so OCD. People then make people like myself that experience these kind of distressing faults seem like a bad person for having faults like this when they're completely normal, especially for people that have been through, you know, child sexual abuse or similar experiences like that. Completely normal to have these faults, and they are distressing. But I think there is such a big thing out there where people sort of say, if you keep your place tidy, you're OCD. It's so much different to that. I am the messiest person you'll probably ever meet. However, I do have certain things in colour order. And that's a preference. I don't think that's part of OCD. I just like, when I was a kid, I liked things in order, and I still do, and it has to be the colour of the rainbow. But if you looked at my house, you'd think, oh my God, she needs a cleaner. So it's, people have different ideas of what OCD is. And I think when I say I've got OCD, they're like, oh, so you must be really clean and tidy then. I'm like, nope, absolutely not.
That's the first thing they think about when they think obsessive or obsessions.
Yeah.
I've heard that as well. And it may be a person who has to match to the T. Like right now, my greens don't exactly match perfectly, or you know, someone might match literally from head to toe, from their glasses to their accessories to their clothes to their shoes. And it's not just the concept of matching. There's that inner urge, there's that inner drive, there's that, as we said before, those intrusive thoughts, because sometimes behaviors can look similar across different conditions or preferences, but it's what's happening on the inside that differentiates whether or not this is a choice, or does this feel uncontrollable? Is this in order, so to speak, or would this be considered disorder?
Yeah, I completely relate to that. And I think when the faults happen, I kind of feel that my whole mind is out of control, and I'm not in control of those faults. Whereas, you know, sometimes I can process through the day and kind of, when I see my faults, I kind of flip through them, almost like a book. But with these, it's like you're going through a book, but in bold writing on every single page, there's this thought, and you can't escape it.
Yeah, I think we go through so many thoughts a day, don't we? Like,
Yeah.
you think about one thing and you think about another thing. It is pretty crazy. Like if you're, especially like maybe on holiday, you think about all the different things you want to do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I guess just get the good thing about going on holiday is that it's away from where you live. Like you're not, but at the same time, you have to get up early. You have to get up really early to see a amount of things you want to see in one day. Really, and that could be stressful. And then in your mind, you could be like, I want to be here a couple of hours, but I've got up late today, and I can't be here as long now. And what am I gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a really big obsession with time. I still do, but not to a degree that I did when I was a child. When my mum used to take me to school, I used to be very distressed if we was even sort of a minute out of time. I'd be like, we need to get in the car now because we're going to be over by a minute. And now looking back, that minute didn't really mean anything. But in my mind, I was like, we need to go now. We need to. And that, no, I couldn't even explain why we needed to. With time now, I like to do things in like 15-minute sort of intervals, so that I can keep myself sort of regulated as much as I can. But as soon as I go over that minute, it's been ruined.
That's interesting. That's interesting. When you said the word regulated, it made me think ritual or routine.
Yeah.
So are there things that you do out of routine that soothe those urges or the feelings to, I want to say focus, right? Like the urges that we're talking about. Maybe you're drawn to certain things or having the intrusive thoughts, or let's say the focus is timing. So what kind of rituals do you have around that soothe the feelings that come with OCD?
I often have my phone with me, and I normally set it on a timer for 15 minutes, and I'm constantly, as I'm sort of getting ready, looking at that. And I know that, you know, to do my face, I do everything in a specific order. And the night before I go anywhere, everything's set out ready for the day, because otherwise I would not be able to function in the morning. I would be completely overwhelmed and I'd probably have a meltdown. So I like to set everything ready. One thing that I do because I do get overwhelmed quite a lot, admittedly, and my biggest soothing point is water. So I will often sit in the bath for hours. I'm not talking 2 hours, I'm talking maybe 3-4 hours, just sitting there, sort of looking at videos, looking at bubbles, just enjoying the water, because it helps me feel soothed. And then once I've done that, I almost feel a bit more, ah, I can do this. I can get on with my day now. But I don't have 3-4 hours every morning to have a really long bath.
Yeah, it's nice though. Like whenever I go, like see my brothers actually, and I go in the bath because it's much better than mine. Mine's I've got a tiny little thing, um, and I have showers normally, but I have a bath every once in a while because I just feel it's like, I guess it's rewarding if you had a really tough day. But I would sit in there hours as well. But
Yeah.
and then get told, you've been in, what are you still in here for?
Yeah. Yeah, I also find it kind of helps me go through my thoughts in a place that I feel comfortable, because, you know, when you're having sort of an episode with the OCD, you it there's nothing worse than being in a place where you feel uncomfortable. So sort of going into the bath and letting the thoughts sort of fly in, and I try and just let them fly in and out, almost trying to meditate really, just to get to sort of go through them, but not ignoring them, because I think ignoring them sometimes makes them worse. It kind of makes them louder. So I try and sort of sit there and just let the thoughts come in, come out, and sort of flow, without. Another thing that I have done before is, I called it my worry book, and I used to put all my worries down in the book, and I'd say to myself, okay, we'll have a look at that 8 o'clock this evening. And a lot of the time it got to 8 o'clock and I didn't even want to look at it. But sometimes I'd give myself 20 minutes to just sit and look at the worries, just to set that time to really experience the worrying, to get through it and process it, because I didn't want to always ignore it.
I like that. I like that. Everything has its space. Everything has its own little box, and some sometimes Well, it's a part of it. I was going to say sometimes anxiety shows up, but yeah, like some of the thoughts that you experience, some of the urges, it does increase anxiety. It can even increase feelings of distress. So already having a bit of a plan to even literally, like you said, have your worry. Did you say book or box?
Worry book. So I
Oh,
write it down just as a list, because
oh,
I like lists.
yes, same, same. I love
They're the
lists too.
best.
So having your worry book and designating a time to actually look at that and consider it, that means that it's got its own time. There's no other time for it. I love that. I
Yeah, it
love
kind
that.
of sets it aside. I haven't been doing that lately, admittedly. It's probably something I could reintroduce, because I sometimes do things for a while. I kind of hyperfixate on things, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm never doing that again,
Mhm, mhm.
for no reason, other than I just kind of don't want to do it anymore.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, Charlotte, have you ever talked with a therapist or a counselor about your OCD? Have you received suggestions that might help?
Yeah, so I have counselling every week, to help with my OCD, to help me get by with understanding communication and sort of processing my week, um, because I'm late diagnosed autistic. So I was diagnosed last year, because I got a really sort of rough patch. And I mean, I've struggled for years. I didn't go to school for a fair amount of time. And when I did go back, I went part-time. Um, but because of how I am, and I can sometimes talk forever, people sometimes mistake that as confidence. And I think a lot of people um, look at me and think that I'm not autistic, um, and that's something that I sometimes struggle with, um, especially when it comes to communicating, because I've masked for so long and sort of pretended that I understand what's going on when a lot of the time I don't always have a clue. Um, I'm going through the process with my therapist to sort of work on that and learn to realize that, you know, learn to love me for being me, rather than love my mask. I want the mask to disappear, basically.
Oh, wow. Well said. Well said. Learn to love yourself and not
Yeah.
the mask. Love it.
Yeah, because I feel like the mask just has taken over every part of my being. And you, I just feel like I'm never going to be happy unless I really am just me. And if I lose people in my life, that don't like the true me, they weren't supposed to be there anyway. And the people that do stay are people that can also accept and love me for me just as much as I hope to someday.
Mhm. Awesome. I heard you say that you've been diagnosed autistic for a year.
Yeah.
Were you going through other assessments prior? Or
No, I mean, I from the age of 11, when I moved from primary school to secondary school, I became very unwell. Um, I used to do dancing and I used to love it, but I wasn't able to maintain routines. I constantly needed to sleep. I couldn't process a lot of what people said to me. Um, I'm surprised my family didn't pick it up earlier, because my sister used to speak for me constantly for years, and I never used to smile, when I was very young. Um, and because I got unwell, they diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, and it didn't make sense because I was so fit physically. Um, and for years, I kind of went with that diagnosis. I then went back to school and found it really, really overwhelming. Um, and I started having seizures. that were non-epileptic, and we didn't understand why. They said that they were migraines, and then I got told they're non-epileptic seizures, part of functional neurological disorder. And then later on, we discovered I've developed POTS, probably because of the prolonged bed rest that I had. But ultimately, I went to go see a psychiatrist because I started feeling that I was going a bit crazy with my thoughts, and I often feel like I can't function on a day-to-day. I have to focus on one thing at a time. So, self-care sometimes takes a setback if I'm having to sort of think about what I need to eat to be healthy, or if I need to focus on trying to get exercise into my routine. I struggle with too many things at once. So I went to get a assessment with a psychiatrist, and that's where I was diagnosed quite swiftly.
Okay. It's good to have the support of professionals. It's good to seek doctors and counselors and therapists recommendations, and get those assessments started, because sometimes, whether it's mental or physical, it can take an extensive amount of time. It's not always a diagnosis that's readily identified and, signed off on. It can take lots of time. There are lots of different things that can be ruled out. I'm sure there's symptoms that overlap other conditions, so I imagine it was difficult to identify. And then also for you, dealing with all of the differences and the changes and the fatigue and the just the adjustment, and like you said, feeling like, oh my goodness, what's happening to me? What is this? What is this? So I imagine that was stressful as well.
It was. I think also speaking to my mum about sort of what happened when I got unwell from sort of the age of 11, we looked back and and I spoke with my psychiatrist about it, and we don't think it was chronic fatigue syndrome at all. We think it was autistic burnout, where I just reached a peak and I couldn't get out of it. I mean, my mum had to help me with simple tasks like having a bath. She used to wash my hair and all brushing my hair and trying to get me out of bed to go and clean my teeth, because my brain felt so fried. Because that's literally what it feels like. Sometimes it feels like your brain feels like it's all crispy inside and it's just not working at all. So my mum kind of looked back and we was talking about it, and she was like, yeah, I don't think that was ME at all. I think it was definitely autistic burnout. And I always had problems with my senses as a child and all through my life. I had to have tags cut off all my clothes. Smells would set me off, so we had to have quite a neutral smell in the home. Vanilla being the only one I could tolerate, because I have a very, very strong sense of smell, and noise I struggle with as well. So I used to try and go to lay in bed for a while, and my mum would have the telly on, and if it was vibrating too much, because it felt like a vibration in my ears that it tickled, I'd sort of go downstairs and be like, will you turn that telly down? And she never understood why, because it wasn't really that loud, but for me it was. So yeah, it's looking at all the patterns as I go back on my life was quite an eye-opener. Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think like noise is something that I find annoying too, and it's really annoying because like everyone will experience noise differently, and they won't understand, especially if you don't like telly, like if it's too loud or if someone's eating perhaps too loud. I always think with noise, that certain noises are different to others. So, and some things are not necessary to make a certain amount of noise either. I think I always bring the suggestion of soup into it when I talk about noise, because um, I don't make any noise when I'm having soup myself, unless I'm at the bottom, which is understandable. But when I hear people make not so much noise when eating soup, I think it's like a drink, really. You could
Mm,
almost just drink it, but that'd be rude. But
yeah,
um, but it's hard because I think it's harder if it's maybe one or two people in a room with you than maybe a whole 10, maybe 10 people. It's maybe easier to process, perhaps, if there's more in the room making a certain noise than other. Because say if you go to an event, and you're going to a music event, and let's say maybe Queen's playing, and someone maybe will say to you, how come you don't like a certain noise like soup? Are you okay with watching a concert or going to Queen?
mm.
But yeah, that's why it's very hard to even explain noise. But I
It's
completely
hard
get it.
to understand for ourselves, I think, as well, because I think one thing for me is I like going to restaurants because I love experiencing the atmosphere. But if there's music playing, knives and forks, people talking, and I can't even hear I can't even sort of think for myself because of everything going on. It doesn't even have to be the volume. It's more how many noises are going on at once, and can
Mm,
I still continue to hear the person in front of me? So I always struggled with that going out with groups. Groups particularly, because when people start talking over each other, I struggle for my brain struggles to function with that. But it's more for me the number of noises going on at once, and also a noise might be, I say it tickles my ears because I get a tickling sensation in my ears, and sometimes it can hurt. But when I was on holiday, there was a music sort of a song that they played every morning, and it kind of every morning I was like, I'm feeling irrationally angry about this noise. And all it did was da 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 da. But that noise in itself was just triggering, and I don't know why. And then they put on another song, and I was like, oh, that's lovely. I like that one. But it was the da da. I was just like, nope, I can't cope with that.
mm,
So it can be dependent on the type of noise as well.
yeah, uh, definitely. I completely agree. Like every noise is different, um, and it's hard. Also, if you tell someone maybe that you don't like a noise, they'll do it. Because I'll say, if someone maybe is making a cup of tea or coffee and they rattle the spoon around the cup, that just annoys me, because I don't get how it makes so much noise. It's like a drill to me.
Yeah.
It's like a drill, and the actual person will say, I'm not making that much noise," and I think it's preference on the person. And then if we make noise, which we probably do sometimes, people say, "How come you can make that noise and I can't?"
Oh, yes. I'm sometimes blind to how much noise I make. I'm often told, mainly by my partner, really. He's always telling me, do you have to be so loud? And I'm like, I'm not being loud. um, but to him, I am. And even though I feel that I'm being an appropriate level. Um, but the way I am, my partner often sort of jokes about how my thoughts go, and this is linked with the OCD. And I'm glad he jokes about it because I like humour. But even when we was out on holiday, I remember uh, one of his family members sort of joked that one of my cats are going to go out the window and they're not going to return home. And my partner was like, don't say that. She'll think about that all holiday.
Oh,
And it was so true, because I did think about that all holiday. I was like, what if they do? They haven't got a chip where I can actually follow them. They're microchipped, but they're not chipped with like a satellite kind of chip.
yeah. Things like it can be quite triggering and like say certain things and then you think about it constantly. Um,
Yeah.
well, one thing that like you mentioned like earlier about like the holding maybe a row and thinking it was dirty or not. Like that is true though. I think even with OCD, more people should think like that way because it is dirty.
Yeah.
Especially maybe if you're going to town and go up the escalators. The amount of people touch that rail up the escalators and it's crazy how many people do that and especially I guess with having chronic illness as well, it makes us be that way. Um, you want to be more clean. You clean anyway, really, but you just want to be you want to be actually a bit more careful with hygiene and stuff, um, because things do get contaminated very easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing with sort of contamination, I think a lot of it was highlighted during COVID, and I never understood it myself even before that. But I work from home, and go to the office twice a month, which isn't the same as my colleagues, but I can't maintain how many times they go in, because of my energy levels. But basically, if someone goes into the office now and they're sick, I'm like, could you not have just stayed at home? And not to be rude, but if you have the option to stay at home, um, you're then not sort of passing your germs, onto everyone else. Um, and I think a lot of people tend to, if they get sick, they might be sick for a couple of days and then they're fine. But there are people out there like myself and probably yourself, that when we get sick, we are sick for a long time. And not only are we sick for a long time, the recovery takes longer. And then we're then more prone to getting sick again much quicker. I remember, in 2019, the beginning of 2019, I had virus infection constantly throughout the beginning of the year. And it's because my body needed time to recover, but it couldn't recover before it then got ill again. So I've never understood the going into work when sick. But there are companies that obviously aren't as tolerable of people being off sick, but that shouldn't be the case. But unfortunately, it is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I completely agree, and I think now when people say this, um, I think it might have been 2019 or a year or so before the pandemic. I did this work placement somewhere, and that they didn't know anything about chronic illness. They didn't know anything about autism. I had to educate them, and so it's different for everyone. I say, let me know if you're ill, and then um a person actually came up to me and said, "Stay away from me, Mason. I've got a bug." And then I thought to myself, "Think like it's good you told me, but
But they've just come up to you.
yeah, we did. He was at a fair distance, but
Oh, okay.
and then but I think I was going towards him to ask him something, but and then he said, "Stay back, Mason." But it had my mind at the same time. I thought you shouldn't. Why you shouldn't be in? But considering he is the boss, kind of the place, but at the same time, that you find now, if people are even ill, they're still going to work because they have to. They want to get paid. Um,
Mm,
and what I find now, because since pandemic, I'll get like food, like shopping delivered to my house, and
yeah.
you'll find I like you'll say to them, you come to your door, and they go so close to the door, and then you say, "Can you step back?" Like I used to have on my front door a distance. Like I said, it's just COVID, in that compromised sign, but it's down now because there's no point.
Mm.
But the amount of times you say to people, "Step back, please," and then they all take it out of three ways. One, they'll be understanding. One, they'll probably question you, but they probably won't if they're actually on the job. It's more so if you come maybe in a public, but it's one of three ways, or they'll just be really understanding and they'll step back. Um,
Yeah.
but it is really hard to do that. And it's annoying that people are very kind of don't see it.
Yeah, I often have to remind myself that until someone's experienced what you have, they'll never truly be able to know what it's like to be in your shoes. And I think an example of that is in 2019, I had a migraine. It was quite a severe migraine, and we didn't know at the time that caused me to lose walking and movement on the right side of my body, very much like a stroke. But it wasn't. It was just a severe migraine, and I had to learn how to walk properly and all of that again. And when I went to the office one day, I was still walking a little bit funny, and I had my walking stick and everything. And I remember I had people trying to grab me to help me off the train. And I felt so overwhelmed because I was like, don't touch me, don't touch me. Because for me, I don't like touch too much unless I really want it. I kind of describe myself like a cat. It's very selective. But people have this urge to, like, I guess, help, but without asking first. And it sometimes makes you feel even more isolated than if it would have been if they hadn't have helped at all, because it kind of highlights to you that, you know, there is a problem, that I'm not able to do certain things. But again, unless anyone went through that themselves, it's very difficult to sort of know what it feels like to be in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I
definitely.
remember thinking, am I a bad person for thinking I don't want this help? Like, and being ungrateful for it, because I was ungrateful for it, because at some point I found it quite annoying and sort of disrespectful, because I always feel you should ask permission before you do anything, touch anyone's arm or anything. Obviously, I understand people don't always think like that, but it's really important, because you don't know. Someone might have PTSD or something, and
Yeah.
they could literally just lash out. I
Yeah.
don't have that, but I know people that do. But again, with my thoughts, how they work with the OCD, I'm then like, am I a bad person for thinking this? Am I being irrational that I want to slap this person for touching me? And I sort of then question everything all of the time. I think OCD is sometimes questioning everything as well, even though I know what my core values and my core beliefs are. It does sort of set you down a road that you don't want to be down. It feels like a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It can feel like a rabbit hole, and as both of you have said, when you deal with autoimmune deficiencies, chronic illnesses, other conditions, we have to be more aware for ourselves. We're at a higher risk, and oh my goodness, just listening to you say how people might reach out to touch you and help you, I'm like, wait a minute, I've got
Mm,
my personal space, I've got a bubble
mm,
that you should not cross without permission.
yes, yeah,
Some of that is even common courtesy, you know, manners. It's like, oh wait, don't touch me.
yeah, yeah,
So it is not irrational.
no.
That's not an irrational thought to hold on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna touch you back.
yeah, yeah. I think one thing that I would sort of say about OCD is it sometimes makes you question existence of everything in general, because you're kind of you think about these sort of thoughts that are very distressing, because I even get sometimes suicidal thoughts that can be distressing, and I don't even feel suicidal, if that makes sense, but I'll have a thought of, what if I just jumped out of the window? What if I just did this? What if I just did that? Yet there's no part of me that wants to do that. It's just a really strong thought that hits my brain. And I could be in the happiest mood ever, but it'll just pop in for no reason. You get distressing, because then you're like, okay, so maybe my mental health isn't doing as well as I thought it was. And you start then questioning that. And then you go down the insane road, is what I call it, where I'm like, is this going on? Is this real? And it's just a big spiral.
Hmm. That's where it's important to have the mental health professional involved. They can
Definitely.
help you figure out, how do I challenge those thoughts? How do I interrupt them before the spiral continues? And above all else, when at all possible, think safety and security,
Mm.
so that's why it's good to have someone there who can help you sort those thoughts and determine, is this a heightened safety risk? Is this one of those intrusive thoughts, or is this a desire resulting from distress?
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
for me, I often struggle to understand my sort of own emotions and my own feelings. I've spoken about this on my Instagram page before. So I often feel like my emotions are very neutral all the time. Um, and I'll have a positive day, but sometimes that's based on my productivity, which I know it shouldn't be. But I'm like, oh, well, I think it's been positive because I've been able to do this, but I'm connecting it with tasks rather than an
Mm.
emotion, which can be very difficult. Or I can be extremely overwhelmed and I have like a sensory overload, and I have like a shutdown, and I can't kind of get out of that very quickly.
Mhm.
So sort of trying to understand emotions can be quite difficult. One thing that came to my mind earlier was excitement. So I don't often feel excited. Um, when I see people get excited, they're all like, "Oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to this." I will copy, so that I don't seem odd. But I'm thinking, why are we doing this? Why what are we supposed to be excited about? Because I look forward to things out of curiosity, because I'm a very curious mind. I'm like, oh, I get to learn something here. Oh, what can I do here? But I don't get that overjoyed excitement.
Mm.
If I get very happy, for example, I love The Little Mermaid. I love everything mermaids, and I can't wait to see the film. I know that I'm going to cry because that's how happy I will be. So I experience my emotions very differently to a lot of people. When I'm actually happy, I will cry. So when I see people crying, I often think, right, how are they actually feeling? Are they
Mm.
happy? Are they sad? What's going on? And I often question people around me, how are you feeling? How are you feeling right now? How are you feeling? But how are you really feeling? And I'm very curious
Oh
about it
yeah.
because I want to know, also so I can learn. Um, I've kind of learnt my partner's because I'm with him all the time. So I'm like, ah, he's probably feeling this. So then I'll be like, I think I know how you're feeling.
Mhm.
um, and I get excited about it when I get it right, I guess. But again, it's not an excitement. It's just like yes, I understand. So
Yeah,
that's quite a big thing for me, I'd say, is connecting with the emotions.
yeah. Emotions can be really There's so many emotions people can have. Um, speaking of cinema, as we're recording this, I went to cinema yesterday, and there's 4 people in the cinema, including me. Hardly anyone in there. And then,
Oh wow.
you couldn't have guessed it. I went in there, halfway through the film, and I was someone in there sneeze in the cinema. So I uh, I was very anxious when that kind of stuff happens, and
Yeah.
I said to the person I went with, I said, we could have guessed it. We hardly anyone in there. Uh, Lucky enough, we weren't near each other, but you don't have to be near each other for things to spread. I think that's what a
Mm,
lot of people don't, I guess,
Yeah,
understand. A lot of people
that's
say,
true.
um, if you're not next to them, doesn't mean you're not going to get it. But especially in the cinema, it spreads the whole thing. So I put a mask on just after that happened, just so if anything did spread, that maybe could protect me a little bit. But um, but other than that, I did enjoy. I saw the Super Mario movie. Um,
oh wow.
um, yeah, and then one hyperfixation of mine is collecting teddies. I love collecting teddies, and like everywhere I go, I'll get one. So afterwards, I went and bought a Mario teddy. After that film, and I should have got the Luigi one to be fair as well. I just wasn't thinking. I thought I'll just get a Mario one. Um, but yeah, it things like that can happen, but as well as you just enjoy yourself. And actually, you speak about the Little Mermaid film. I, g- After I saw it, I saw the poster on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to go and see it. I'm really looking forward to it. I kind of relate to Ariel in like a lot of ways. She's very curious and always questioning things that aren't considered the norm. And I feel that I've been like that my entire life. Um, I love people that are different, and I didn't ever understand why. I felt that I navigated towards people that were always considered different, and it's because I felt different, but I never realized that I felt different. Um, and that kind of really, really sort of brought me sort of the love of mermaids. And I think the sea is beautiful anyway, and um, if I was to be anything else, I'd love to be in the sea.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Before we finish, guys, I'm just gonna let you guys if you have anything else to say, like any advice. Charlotte, do you have any like maybe last things you wanna say, maybe advice about OCD perhaps?
I think it's really important for people with OCD to just really sort of know that your thoughts are absolutely normal to experience. It doesn't make you a bad person, although you might feel it. This is advice that I would also try and tell myself. It's difficult, I know, but the thoughts that you're experiencing, they're not anything to do with who you are as a person. It's just a thought that pops into your head, and it doesn't define you at all.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice, and yeah, like they don't define you, but sometimes we can't help what we think about sometimes.
We can't. Our minds are miraculous things, and they like to sometimes play tricks on us, and make us question things. Um, but it's important to know that you know the thoughts are temporary.
Yeah. But they definitely are. Angela, do you have any last thoughts that you want to say?
Sure. I just want to say to the viewers and listeners, offer yourself the same grace that you would offer someone else. It may take time to discover and even learn what type feelings you're having, and always seek out professional help. Seek out a professional counselor or a professional therapist who can walk alongside you and help you navigate what's going on in your life at the time. I also want to share some crisis lines in the event that you need support in crisis situations, suicidal situations, or emergencies. So for the US, 988 is the suicide and crisis lifeline. Of course, 911 for all true emergencies. You can also go to your nearest emergency rooms. For the UK and the Republic of Ireland, the emergency number is 112 and 999. For Argentina, 911. For China, it's 110. Australia is 000. And we'll add another one. Canada is also 911. South Africa it's a series of numbers, but it's 10111 to connect with the police for emergencies, or 10177 for an ambulance. So take the time. I know this might be a lot to remember. They may be in the comments, but again, USA 988. It's real simple now. It's not the toll-free 877 or the 1-800 number. There's always a licensed professional on the other end of that line waiting to help you.
Yeah, well, I think good. Thank you, Angela, for sharing there. Like I probably say every episode now that we share those helplines. I think it's good, just so you don't know, just to reach out if you're struggling. But thank you, and thank you, Angela, and thank you, Charlotte, for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, today's episode has been good. The last guest episode, and then after this will be a reunion episode. So we'll see you in that episode, everyone. But to everyone listening and watching, wherever you are, we hope you've enjoyed it. You take something from the episode and learn a few things about OCD, because OCD is different for everyone. But it's been really good to hear Charlotte's story today, about OCD. And I think
Thank you.
thank you, and I think Angela and I probably learned a few things as well, today. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so thank you, everyone. Hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next episode.